So when we speak of settling the body, speech, and mind in their natural state, it's not a matter of simply relaxing or releasing stress. We relax every time we fall deep asleep. We're very relaxed. But the mind is also very dull. We're deep asleep. We don't even know we're sleeping. So this issue of settling in the natural state suggests a type of dynamic balance, a dynamic equipoise, in terms of being, on the one hand, very deeply at ease, relaxed, loose, but also clear and vigilant. Mentally, it's a very energetic state of awareness. It's clear, it's sharp, it's ready for action, but it's also relaxed. It's that balance between the sense of ease, of relaxation, of softness, and the clarity, the sharpness, the energy of a mind that's ready to be put to work. Or even for the body itself, if one is practicing some form of athletics, you don't want to be tight. Whatever the athletic is, whatever the sport might be, it won't go so well if you're tight, right? You want to be loose, but not so loose that you can't do the task at hand. So I find this a very useful preliminary, not only for meditation, not only for giving a talk, listening to a talk. Frankly, I think this simple preparation, which can be much shorter, I laid it out in some detail, so that was something like 10 minutes. But once you get the hang of it, you can settle your body, speech, and mind in this kind of dynamic equilibrium in a matter of seconds. It doesn't need to be many minutes. Like riding a bicycle. When you're first learning, it takes some time not to fall off. But once you've learned how to ride a bicycle, you hop on and you ride, right? So, to prepare one's body and mind to do something very meaningful, settling body, speech, and mind in this natural state, relaxed and yet clear, vigilant, energetic. I think that would be a very good way to begin any classroom, whether in university level or even for kindergarten, for 5-year-olds. This is not complicated. This is not something small children can't do. They just need a bit of encouragement, a bit of, training. So whether for education, how can we learn anything if we're tight, if we're anxious, uptight? How can we learn anything if the mind is not clear? If the mind is not focused? If to varying extent we're suffering from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. If you have attention deficit, how can you learn anything? You're not paying attention. But if you have attention hyperactivity, you're paying attention, but to all kinds of things. Because the mind is scattered, going here and here, like a little bird jumping from one limb of a tree to another. How can you learn anything if your attention is scattered? So, for education, to get an education, the mind must be a suitable vessel to receive the knowledge, the insights, the practical skills the instructor might have to offer. But you may have a brilliant instructor, but if your mind is not a suitable vessel, then you don't get benefit, right? And so for education, even in business, if one comes to a board meeting and is discussing policy for one's company, it seems to me this would be a good way to spend the first 2 minutes. Everybody gathered around the boardroom table. And first, before we jump into the task at hand, which will require intelligence and memory and creativity and discipline and insight, we need to get the job done. True, yes? Wouldn't the job be better done, more effectively done, if everybody at the boardroom table is beginning the formal meeting relaxed, still, composed, and clear, energetic, bright? So, for the mundane tasks of the world, of running businesses, of getting education, and then of course of mental health, a balanced mind is really the key. So that's how we begin. So, my dear friend, respected colleague Sinto has given me a number of questions here. I'm not sure how closely I will adhere to the questions, let alone the notes that I wrote. But they're certainly very meaningful questions. I think otherwise you wouldn't be here. Questions that we're already asking of ourselves. As a Buddhist practitioner, translator, teacher, I find that the teachings of the Buddha and the Buddhist tradition over the last 2,600 years, to a very large extent, the teachings are addressing concerns we already have. Certainly, ideas are raised, theories, hypotheses, perspectives are raised that we may never have thought of. Perhaps they weren't our concerns when we first entered. They come gradually. But the Buddha Dharma must come to meet us where we live and not ask us to go to the monastery first, where they live. Right? And so I'm assuming, since you are all here, you must already have some interest in how you may cultivate a greater version of yourself. Otherwise, you came to the wrong lecture. Wrong time, wrong place. Right? I'm interested also. I know for myself, I'm a work in progress. I'm not a finished product. I'm not an arhat. I'm not Buddha. So a work in progress. Right. So how to become a better version of ourselves? One of the questions is how to become better versions of ourselves in the various roles that we play. So for myself, although I was a monk for many years, I've now been a layperson, my dedication to Dharma is the same. Dedication to Dharma is the same. But simply lifestyle somewhat different. But as I'm getting older, also, the difference also is fading away somewhat. So not a whole lot of difference, but still, I have great respect for those who've taken monastic ordination. But my life over the last 25 years or so, 26 years, has been as a layperson, but again, I really have devoted as much as I possibly can, my life, to practicing Dharma. And we look at this question in the context of Dharma, of a better version of ourselves, in the various roles we play. So in my present context, I'm a grandfather, I'm a stepfather, I'm a husband, I'm a teacher, I'm a student, I'm a translator, a teacher, a writer, and so forth. I'm also a citizen, a taxpayer, and so forth. So we have many roles that we pick up and we put down. So when my grandson is with me, I'm arising in the mode, relational, relative to this one little boy, of grandfather. He calls me grandpa. Nobody else does. So I'm arising in that occasion relative to this little boy as grandfather. To only one person am I arising in the mode of being husband. To some people I'm arising in the mode of being a teacher. To others I'm arising in the mode of being student, and so forth. So there are many roles that we take on through the course of our life, different stages of our lives. And the roles come and go. I can easily imagine no longer being a teacher. All I have to do is stop teaching. I'm no longer a teacher. It's finished, right? I can very easily imagine no longer writing, no longer being an author. Written many books, or I can easily imagine stopping. Then I'm so, okay, I used to be an author, but no longer an author, right? So roles come and they go. I used to be a monk, now no longer a monk. I'm now actively teaching, but I can imagine stop teaching and just spending my time in solitary practice, in retreat. I can easily imagine, quite happily imagine. So there are many roles that come and go. But then we can ask, in the midst of the roles that come and go, in the midst of different phases of our lives, in which we're active in one mode, maybe we shift jobs to another occupation, we shift to another place of working, of living, and so forth. We move from parent to grandparent, and so forth. Roles come and go. Without positing the notion of immutable ego, some abiding self, that it doesn't change through time. That, of course, is refuted in Buddhism. For lack of evidence, where is the evidence of some ego that is somehow independent, autonomous, and unchanging? I think if you look very carefully, as is done in Buddhist meditation, in vipassana, or vipassana practice, insight practice, examining closely one's body, first-person perspective, experiencing the body from the inside, do you see anything static, anything that is unchanging? I have not found. Everything in a state of flux. Every aspect of the body, the brain, the heart, the internal organs, the flow of the blood, everything in a constant state of flux. And then likewise, if you really learn how to observe the mind, and it is a trained skill, some people are more gifted, some people less gifted, but we all have the ability to cultivate our observational faculty for observing the mind, knowing the mind. And once again, you can ask, as you observe the emotions, desires, memories, a wide variety of mental processes arising and passing, do you find anything that is static, unchanging? The Buddhist conclusion that has been drawn many thousands of times over a couple of thousand years, all in a state of flux. So when we ask a better version of ourselves, we can look at the derivative question. I'd like to be a better teacher, or a better father, or a better citizen, a better director of a business, for example. But these roles come and go. I would like to ask a deeper question, or an underlying question. And that is, if you wish to cultivate a better version of yourself, why not ask a simple question? Why? What's your motivation? Why do you want to be a better version of yourself? What's wrong with you as you are right now? Isn't that good enough? Right? I find many aspects of human nature be very, very interesting. And one of the most interesting that I find has not been satisfactorily explained in terms of biology, evolution, and so forth, is that not only do we human beings want to be happy, clearly we do. We want to experience pleasure, not pain. But we experience that in common with all animals. Every sentient being. Not one wants to be suffering. Every single one wants to find some degree of pleasure, even if just physical pleasure. Maybe also mental happiness. We all want. So there's nothing distinctive, nothing unique about human beings in that regard. All sentient beings, as so often stated in Buddhism, we all want to be free of suffering. We all want to experience happiness. What I find, I don't know that it's unique, but it's quite distinctive about human beings. We not only want to be happy, we want to be happier. We want not only to have enough food, enough clothing, enough shelter, we want not only to have enough. Even when we have enough, we don't just fall asleep and then wake up and have enough again. When I was growing up, I had dogs. We had pet dogs. And I saw with my dogs, they're quite easily satisfied. You give them something to eat, you play with them, and then they take a nap. And then they wake up and they want to eat some more and play around some more. And then they take a nap. They're quite content to eat and play. It's good enough. For some human beings, that's good enough too. You work and then you play. And then you rest. You work and play and rest. Work and play. And then you get old and you die. For some people, that's enough. Okay. No problem. But not for everyone. Especially in a relatively affluent, very well-governed, very successful society and country like Singapore. And the others I visited also, doing really quite well, materially, financially. Quite well, quite a success, right? Still dissatisfaction. Even when you're successful, still some depression, some level of anxiety. Maybe not even sleeping so well. Not really content. So we want to be happy, but we want to be happier. We want to be better. So why does anyone here want to create a better version of ourselves? I would suggest it's because we want to be happier. Happier. Find greater fulfillment, greater meaning, greater satisfaction. So it's good. For me, ever since I left the university, when I was 20, so a long time ago, but I left the university with great dissatisfaction. I was a good student, I got good grades. University of California, very good university. But I found there was no satisfaction, even though really I was very fortunate. I had my own car, I had loving parents, I was doing well in school, it was a good university, everything good. So from outside you say, what do you have to be unsatisfied about? You're really fortunate. You won. You're doing great. You're going to have a successful career. Very little doubt. The only thing missing for me was I wasn't finding any meaning. I wanted something of greater fulfillment, something that would provide some inner joy, some inner satisfaction. Not everything outer, outer, outer. And I wasn't finding it in the university. I wasn't finding it in the religion in which I brought up. This is not a criticism of Christianity. It's simply saying for me in that phase of life, I look for it in the religion in which I was raised. I didn't find what I was seeking. I think what I was seeking was meditation. And that was not something that was taught in the form of Christianity in which I'd been raised. So I left. I discontinued my university education for many years, 14 years, in search of meaning. I think that's why you're here, in search of meaning. If you came here thinking, I'm going to make you a more successful businessman, you'll make more money, oh, you came to the wrong place. If you think you'll get greater sensual pleasure because of this lecture, I doubt it. Greater status, greater influence, greater, fame and so forth. Oh, I don't think I can help. Not much use, right? What provides a life with meaning? Why do we wish to be better versions of ourselves? I think it's meaning. And so as I've reflected upon this personally in my own life, my own aspirations, as I reflect upon those around me, as I've now met many, many people, I see three aspirations, three pursuits that to my mind have everything to do with meaning. And one is the pursuit of virtue, because that's what we really mean, a better version of ourselves. I don't think you came here thinking a better version of myself is I want to make more money. I want to have an extreme makeover and look more attractive. Or more power, more influence, more status. I don't think that's why you're here. Why would you come to a Buddhist monastery to learn that? You go to some other seminar, it'll be much more expensive. Right? Not that. To live a better life, to be a better person. And there are virtues, whether there are Christians here, are Buddhist, secular people, whether they're from any kind of worldview. There are many virtues that we all agree upon, whether religious or non-religious. We can give quite a long list. Greater patience, greater kindness, greater generosity, greater compassion, humility, and so forth. And we know what the negative qualities are. Again, there's a great degree of common agreement. Being belligerent, being angry, being selfish, arrogant, contemptuous, greedy, selfish, and so forth. We all know. And we all know that we are prone to, that on occasion our minds are subject to, almost like coming down with the flu or some other contagious disease. At times our minds do succumb to these mental afflictions. They're called klesha in Sanskrit. Things that afflict the mind, that give rise to unrest, being ill at ease, throwing the mind out of balance. And we know we're not at our best. So I was just having a conversation, an interview, and I made this comment, very core Buddhist teaching. When you see that your mind, on occasion, is not at its best, the mind is afflicted, it's imbalanced, there's something negative, something unhealthy about the mind now, not just generally, but on occasion. Like contagious disease, it comes and goes. The symptoms are there, and then they subside. How can we become better versions of ourselves? Is to not empower the mental afflictions when they do arise. We don't have the choice, at least I don't have the choice. All right, I'll never be selfish again. I'll never be impatient again. I'll never have craving or attachment again. I would like to make such a decision. Not so easy, right? So we can't simply control whether our minds on occasion become quite unhealthy, quite negative, quite afflictive. But where there can be some control, some real influence, where we can become more master of our own lives and become gradually, day by day, better versions of ourselves, is by not empowering the mental afflictions when they do arise. Just like when we have a contagious disease, We would like for it to just stop, but we don't have that ability. We suffer. It's a flu. We have all the symptoms of flu. Very unpleasant. But there's something we can do for society when we have the flu. And that is quarantine ourselves. Do our best not to make our disease contagious. Right? Then you're a good sick person. You're keeping it to yourself. But of course, we don't only experience negative states of mind, unhealthy states of mind, afflictive states of mind. We also naturally, in the course of the day, of a week, of a month, and so forth, there are occasions when wholesome mental states of generosity, of kindness, of caring for other people, of patience, of mindfulness come up. Right? They come up. On those occasions, that's a time to really engage. That's the time when we can offer our best. That's the time when we can empower these wholesome mental states. So where does mindfulness come in? This is one of the questions. How can we become better versions of ourselves? Well, first of all, recognize when is that mind relatively healthy? When is the mind relatively unhealthy? And then moreover, Buddhist insight practice, vipassana, is very much about gaining insight into what are the causes and conditions that help bring about more wholesome states of mind, positive emotions, benevolent states of mind, mindfulness, clarity of attention, inner peace, quiet, calm. What are the causes? Well, this is where meditation really comes in. This word meditation, the Sanskrit is bhavana, which means to cultivate. So in the quiet of our own rooms, or that when you have a residential retreat center here, perhaps you can take a weekend or a week or even longer and have only one thing to do: cultivate your heart and mind. Metta bhavana, cultivating loving kindness towards yourself, loving kindness towards others, cultivating mindfulness, greater presence of mind, cultivating attention skills. And so a crucial element of this, of cultivating, creating better versions of ourselves, is recognizing, what does that even mean? What are those occasions in which really wholesome qualities are coming forth that we would like to empower, to cultivate, to strengthen? And doing so through meditation, but also by acting. When it comes to loving kindness, one of the greatest virtues that we all accept, atheist or religious, Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, we all value loving kindness. We all know it's a virtue. Right? When it comes up, the Buddha said there are two ways of cultivating loving kindness. One is sitting quietly in meditation, in solitude, and practicing metta bhavana, the meditative cultivation of loving kindness. So I won't teach it right now. It's quite simple, not complicated. Children can also do, right? So this is one way of cultivating the mind through meditation. But the Buddha said there's another way of cultivating loving kindness, and that is acting with loving kindness, expressing it, bringing it out to the world. That also cultivates one's own mind. So we cultivate the mind not only in solitude, not only in quiet, not only in meditation retreat, but the mind is cultivated through activity. So the Venerable Abbot spoke of socially engaged Buddhism. Socially engaged Buddhism is a way to directly be of benefit to the world around us, to other human beings, to animals, to the environment at large. Very important. But socially engaged Buddhism, by acting in benevolent ways, acting with wisdom, acting with mindfulness, is also a way of cultivating our own minds. And so as we're cultivating our own minds, then we are also poised, we're preparing ourselves to venture out into the world in a more positive, constructive, benevolent, wise, and compassionate way. So in this way, the barrier or the demarcation, the separation of meditating in solitude and practicing socially engaged Buddhism, the boundary between the two begins to fade out. Because as you're socially engaged, you're cultivating your mind. And as you're cultivating your mind, you're preparing yourself to be socially engaged. So I think I'd like to come to a close pretty quickly here, because I think what I'm looking forward to most is not hearing my own voice. I've heard it many times. But what I'm looking forward to is your own questions, your comments, the insights you might like to share. I'm looking forward to the dialogue. But I'll say this in terms of the core theme: better versions of ourselves. We can ask, but who are we prior to the various roles that we take on? The role of a parent, an employee, an employer, a husband, a wife, and so forth. We can approach this question from the outside in. We can take workshops, we can take seminars, we can get coaching on how to be a better boss, a better husband, a better father, better parent, and so forth. All good, no problem. But I think the Buddhist approach, simply another approach, is to work more from the inside out. And that is prior to adopting a particular role, when we're sitting quietly in our own chambers, coming more to the core, to the simplicity of ourselves prior to and independent of the roles we take on as parent, employee, and so forth and so on. Cultivating the better version of ourselves from the inside out. How are you if you're sitting quietly in a room and there's no activity around you, no one to engage with, no one to respond to? You're simply sitting quietly. And it's just you, your body, your mind. How are you? How is the version of yourself when you're reduced to simplicity? When you're reduced to simply being present in the world? What's it like to be you, naked and alone? If that you in your simplicity is at peace, restful, clear, if the quality of awareness is peaceful, serene, contented, energetic, that's the core. You're bringing, when you step off your cushion to preparing breakfast for your children, going to work, going on vacation, engaging with fellow employees, and so forth. It's your core you're bringing. Yourself in your simplicity, naked, bare, presence in the world. I think this is the Buddhist approach. The primary Buddhist approach is there. This transformation, this purification, this psychological and spiritual evolution to mature psychologically, spiritually, mature in terms of compassion, skillful means called upaya, maturing in terms of wisdom, having a clear vision, a clear understanding of what is it to live a good life, what makes us genuinely happy, what actually brings about a sense of contentment, of fulfillment, of satisfaction. What are the actual causes of that? The Buddha said, find what truly makes you happy and pursue that. So in this regard, I think it's very meaningful to draw a distinction between the types of satisfaction, pleasure, enjoyment that we experience that's arising in response to good fortune, congenial circumstances, pleasant environment, pleasant people, pleasant job, pleasant environment, and so forth. This is called hedonic pleasure. Anybody can experience that because you're responding to something that's very pleasant, so you experience pleasure. No mystery there, right? And many people, I think, to a large extent, envision the good life in terms of these outer manifestations. That, oh, look, this person's so fortunate. This person is very good looking, is very healthy, has a very healthy family, has a good job, has a success, has some influence, has some status, and so forth. Oh, this person's so fortunate. We're seeing almost like an empty ritual. We all know what empty rituals are like. It looks very religious, but it's actually not religious at all. It's simply an outer form. But it may be, not always, of course, but religious rituals can be utterly empty. The robes are there, the chanting is there, the rituals are there, and so forth. It all looks very religious, but it may be empty, isn't it true? Whether it's Christian, Buddhist, this is not sectarian. The outer form is that there's no content. It's not truly spiritual. There's no genuine virtue. There's no depth. There's no deep goodness. It's simply a display. It's a show. Religion often gets condemned for its empty rituals, for people who call themselves religious not living up to, not even trying to live up to the ideals that are taught, that are encouraged in their own religion. But as there are empty rituals in religion, there are also empty rituals in terms of the mundane or worldly vision of the good life. You see, outwardly, oh, this person has such a good life. So handsome, so healthy, so strong, so successful, so much wealth, so much prosperity, status, influence. Oh, wow, this person's so fortunate. And meanwhile, popping one pill after another for anxiety, for depression, for insomnia. No satisfaction. It's an empty ritual. All the outer display of prosperity, of the good life is there, and there's no core. There's nothing behind it. It's an empty facade. Isn't it true? And in a relatively affluent, prosperous, and well-governed country like Singapore, there's a real edge there. Because outwardly you have every reason to be happy. People say, but look, you have everything. You've got what other countries are striving for, where there's so much poverty, poor education, poor health, and so forth and so on. No wonder they're struggling. But in very prosperous countries like Sweden, like Switzerland, like New Zealand, like Singapore, if you're still not happy, even when you're really succeeding, then you start asking interesting questions. That's when Dharma really shows Dharma, spiritual practice, the cultivation of heart and mind, is indispensable for finding the good life, the true good life, the truly better version of yourself, not merely a role, not merely a facade, not merely making an impression, but from the inside. So in a way, this is the whole point. This is the great value of being relatively prosperous, of having leisure, that you don't need to spend these 2 hours working to make a little bit more money so you can take care of your children. Your children will not suffer if you take off 2 hours tonight. You'll not miss any meals. You'll not miss paying your rent or your mortgage. You'll get by. You really have the leisure to spend 2 hours in something that may not be financially productive, right? We have that leisure. You have that leisure in a relatively prosperous place like Singapore. Much more difficult if you're living in a place like Syria, the Sudan, Bangladesh. Much harder. So in a way, to have succeeded in terms of hedonic well-being, worldly success, is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. Not as an end in itself, but having taken care of our worldly needs, then we are poised, we are ready, we are ripe for asking deeper questions. What constitutes a meaningful life? What does it mean to have a better version of ourselves? What does that mean? Where's the core? Where's the essence? So whether outwardly you have great prosperity or you merely have enough, you have great fame or you're hardly known by anyone, you have great power and influence or very little, all of that is quite secondary. Because I have known people, I've lived with monks, I've lived with other people as well, who have very little wealth, very little power, very little status, but such immensely meaningful lives, contented lives, lives of fulfillment. They have enough. They're not struggling just to have enough to eat and so forth. But having enough, then rather than trying to have too much, and then way too much, and then way too much, which frankly is the model of Eurocentric civilizations. If you have enough, good, now have 10 times as much. Right? That materialistic paradigm is, frankly, it's antiquated. If there was ever a time when it was timely, that time is past. Because we now have 7 billion people on the planet. And if all of us, all 7 billion of us, each one of us wants to have too much, wants to have way more than we need, then the world is not large enough. There are not enough natural resources. We will deplete and violate our natural environment. It's not a model that works. And now it becomes more and more evident that to strive to have enough is very meaningful, that's good. To strive to have way more than enough in terms of acquisition, consumption, and so forth. At this point, I have to say, I think it's morally irresponsible. Because if one person has way more than that person needs, this means other people have less than they need. Isn't it true? So another vision of the good life, of not just more and more of the same, but having enough of the basic requisites, and then having a great appetite for greater meaning, a greater version of ourselves, having a vision of perfection. This is the Buddhist vision, the vision of an arhat, the vision of a Buddha, is the best version of ourselves, to aspire to be utterly free of all mental afflictions, utterly free of all behavior that is injurious, that is unwholesome, harmful. To find genuine freedom. Freedom from the afflictions of the mind, freedom from behavior that is motivated by unhealthy mind, afflicted mind. To find contentment within. This is a model that can work for 7 billion people. To have enough in terms of material, but have a great bounty in terms of inner meaning and inner transformation.